I have to ask your perspective on Israel, their economy, their domestic place after these hostilities. How will Israel come out of these hostilities?
Well, thank you very much. Good morning. I'm very optimistic about the medium term of Israel, but we are now in the midst of a crisis, a war that started from an extraordinary, cruel, uncivilized attack on Israel, and the Israelis have to defend themselves. The cost is very high in terms of casualties, in terms of resources, in terms maybe of even of some political support. But it's going to be over, and once it's over, the record of Israel of rejuvenating after wars is very, very clear. We are picking it up very quickly. And once all the reservists are released, coming back to business, Israel will know how to re-emerge. The technology is still there, the comparative advantage is still there, the expertise are still there, and the markets are still there. So it is in this regard that the important thing is to cross that particular crisis.
Is a special relationship of the United States and Israel damaged or changed?
Well, to begin with, the special relationships are key to Israel. And Israel has, over the years, been the only democracy in the region sharing the values with the United States. So we are very, very grateful to the extraordinary support given by the United States. Of course, the United States has its own political cycle, but Israel now is fighting for its existence, for its the safety of its citizens, and it will need to complete the job with the most professional and careful way. But, you know, we are not dealing with a normal army that is fighting us. It's terrorism. And against terrorism, it's very, very difficult to have a very, very polite way to deal with them. This is the issue.
I want to segue into your experience as the former head of Israel Central Bank, but also as the chair of the Group of 30, and kind of at the crossroads of understanding how to operate economic policy when you're dealing with fiscal policy that is inconsistent and maybe lacking in certain areas. You wrote in your recent piece, central banks cannot solve all that ails our economies and should not be expected to solve problems that other actors can better address. This was the discussion over years of financial repression. Do you think that there is the leadership to be able to take the helm away from central bankers?
Well, the important point is that leaderships are rising to challenge. And if central banks are stepping into each and every crisis, of course, it becomes overburdened. And once it becomes overburdened, it's becoming less clear, less transparent, maybe even confusing. So I think that what we have seen in the past few years is that we are operating in a very complex economic environment. You know, when I was governor of the central bank, life was very simple. We had to fight inflation, and you have an instrument which was called interest rates. The importance now of financial markets, of fragility, of speed of transmission, of expectations, makes it much more complex, and therefore we should be careful not to assume that the central bank knows more than what it does know, and it should specialize in the areas that it has comparative advantage, that it has the competence, has the tools, that is also protected by the law. And therefore the competence is about achieving and maintaining price stability, strengthening financial stability, and securing the fundamental of the financial markets. But by and large, this is the mandate. We have seen in the past, especially because we have had series of crises, real and nominal, domestic and international, that central bankers were very, very good citizens, and therefore they rose to the challenge and therefore went into regions and areas that are not exactly their competence and what they are expected to do. We call for go back to basics.
Which is the reason why I think it's interesting that we're talking about rate cuts in March, even though we're looking at a 4% core inflation rate in the U.S. And I'm wondering if there was this simple mandate, whether that would even be in the rhetoric at all, whether there's almost a political overlay in protecting something else by cutting rates at a time when inflation is still well above a target.
The important point is two things that you mentioned. Number one, we are talking about not current inflation, but expected inflation in the medium term. And this is the objective, in the medium term. And what you do now will have its impact over the next several quarters, quite a few. And number two, we should really not speak just about rate cuts or rate hike. That's the way that we are all focusing every day. Will it be at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m.? Are we on the trajectory to stability in the economic system? And the central bank can contribute to this objective by securing price stability in the medium term. About the political support comes from the credibility that the central bank has earned and will have to earn in order to secure its actions. It needs to be clear, it needs to be transparent, it needs to be accountable, and it needs to basically chart the way. And once it charts the way, nobody will come back to it and say, yes, but we have a budget deficit. Well, deal with the budget deficit. If you are the government, the central bank cannot deal with it and should not.
Is it the end of activist central banking then? Do you think it is?
Activism means get out of the lane that you are driving, or make sure that you are driving carefully within the lane and being able to navigate within the lane. And activism does not mean necessarily a detour. It means, yes, have your eyes open and your steering wheel is not going only to the right, occasionally also to the left, especially if the road is not straight. But the important thing is to make sure that you're sticking by the guns. If you do, believe me, the medium term will be much, much simpler and better, and central banks will not behave like I'm going to take all the governments off the hook. The governments have their responsibilities, central banks have their responsibilities, and that's the way it is.
Just a fantastic review, Tom, of central banking of the last couple of decades.
Can you see Jacob Frenkel
Back
going,
in the central
I don't know,
bank.
I look at the dots, and I'm looking at the dispersion of the dots.
Would you get rid of the dot plot? Would you get rid of that today?
I'm not sure, but I know that forecasting. Wait. I did not
Only
have.
got a minute.
I did not have dots in Israel, but I can tell you. But I can, because dots are. What do you do with it? Now you saw it. But
would you like to join us a little bit later?
But it is,
2 p.m. What are you doing?
What do you do with that?
but it is important that central bankers communicate with the markets, not lead the market, not hit the market, but are part of the system. They are not even the conductor of the orchestra. They are a major player in the orchestra. Financial markets listen what you are doing, watch what you are doing, and you are part of this interaction.